I'm going to call to order the City of Burlington's Board of Finance meeting on Wednesday, June 25th at 5:33 p.m. The first item on our agenda is the agenda. Is there a motion?
To adopt the agenda.
Moved by Councilor Barlow. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Carpenter. Thank you. Any further discussion on the agenda before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Our next item is our public forum. It is the practice of the Board of Finance to first go to members of the public in the room and then online. And we will first go to in the room. So any to address address the Board of Finance in. Seeing none, I'm glad that people make eye contact now. Fine before. Okay, so no one's in the room. Let's go on.
Should councilors use to be now or later?
You are not a member of the Board of Finance, so using public forum would be the time. Yeah.
Okay.
Wish to address any.
Yes, just one small thing. So
Can you come to the table and say?
Yes.
The record.
thanks so much. Evan Litwin, Ward 7 City Councilor. I think the only question I have for the Board of Finance that was brought up by Director Pine and Rebecca Enciso recently was an issue related to the 9% tax on short-term rental housing, and that apparently the ordinance language that we were sent shows that 9% should be going into the housing trust fund, and that at some point somehow for several years only 7% has been going in and 2% is probably going somewhere in the general fund. And so my hope is that before we move forward with the FY26 budget, that can be corrected so that in FY26 we're actually following the ordinance going forward. And by particularly considering Councillor Newbieser's past resolution looking at which charged CEDO, and CEDO spent time, this is how they identified the issue actually, with identifying how to grow the housing trust fund by $1 million, which we passed out of CDNR last spring, I believe. And I think that number comes up to somewhere around $150,000-ish. And so I wanted to make sure that, I'm sure you're all aware of it, but I wanted to make sure the Board of Finance was aware and to see if it's not too late to correct that for FY26, given that it's in the ordinance language. And thank you so much for letting me address Board of Finance.
Councilor Lipton. Is anyone else in the room who would like to address the Board of Finance? Hearing none, we'll go online. We have former City Councilor Sharon Busher.
Before that, we had someone else raise their hand
okay.
first, and that is Karen Sita. So I will promote you first, Karen, and then Sharon.
All right, Karen Sita, thank you. Welcome.
Yes, can you hear me well? I'm outside.
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure that regarding the budget that there is a clear direction for people who are concerned about the REIB regarding their funding, and also certain companies that have special relationships with the mayor, such as maybe the Richard Kemp Center, have been promised a significant amount. I want to know what the reason was and how that can be made to the public regarding the steps that were taken to ensure that, you know, other people were given the same opportunities. And regarding all these raises that were given to people, I wanted to ensure how is the city going to ensure that these people are entitled to these highly significant increases, and how are people going to ensure that their taxes are going to be properly utilized? So these are some of the things that the public and I are discussing in many online chatters, and there is no doubt that the Reddit community is concerned, but we are still here. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to go on to now former City Councilor Sharon Busher. Yep. Good evening, Sharon.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for entertaining these questions. The first one has to do with the estimate the increased tax estimate for a single-family home that costs $500,000, does that include all the increased fees, or are the increased fees separate from that dollar amount? And I wasn't sure I knew the answer to that, so that would be really helpful to know that. And then I wasn't clear, sorry, but I read the resolution like others, and I really didn't understand what you were trying to convey. This is authorize line 135 to authorize reoccurring purchases by department heads so they don't have to go through a formal process. Makes total sense, but replacement equipment, they can authorize that if no contractual obligation to make the purchase. So I wasn't quite sure what that really meant. It just seemed that got you nowhere as a department head. So I really didn't understand the intent of that language. That's the other question. The last question, well, not comment, is that lines 258 through 260, which were inserted for tracking impact fees collected and expended, and on a schedule, like the first one would be in December or January, and then annually. It would be good for me as a member of the public, having followed the conversation, and it doesn't have to be amended into your budget resolution at this late date, but it would be really helpful to also have that hand in hand with the capital fund expenditures, because one of the premises was that if we don't impose impact fees for fire and police and libraries and parks and rec, the capital dollars that would have gone to transportation and water, wastewater would be freed up to be spent on these other departments. And I would just like to see if that's a reality. So those are my comments on the resolutions before you tonight, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharon. Is anyone else online who would like to address the Board of Finance in public? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close public forum and we'll move on to our deliberative agenda, for which we have 2 items tonight. Item 3.1 is a resolution requesting our annual appropriation and budget, essentially the budget for fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2025, ending June 30th of 2026, which will follow the fiscal year 26 budget. And CEO Shad and I will be presenting this, sort of tag teaming this, and we're going to do a very light version here in Board of Finance and a bit more upstairs, but happy, of course, to answer questions as they come up on this item as well as the next item. So I just want to start by just saying some opening remarks on this budget and budgeting process. I am very proud of this budget. This is a budget that I really truly believe illustrates our unwavering commitment to making the city of Burlington a more affordable city, and also stewarding resources as responsibly as possible while investing in some really important priorities for the city around community safety and housing. This has not been an easy year, and these first 2 years as mayor have not been easy with the structural budget gaps that we have faced, last year being 14.2 million and this year being 9.8 million. This is because of structural challenges that are inherent to our budget, but this year we really took a very deep dive into the budgeting process by department to get really serious about addressing these structural problems, to be able to start narrowing that gap, to take this pressure off of our cyclical budgeting process. I'll talk more upstairs, but I just want to really emphasize that some of the pressures on this budget this year have been growing for a while, and others are more sort of emergent from the last year around what's been facing the city and our state and our country. But as folks have heard me say before, part of the challenges have been around the unsustainable growth of our city. We have added 98 positions, full-time equivalent positions in the city over the last 9 years. 37 of those were funded with one-time funds without a sustainable long-term funding source identified. Our health insurance, just this 1 year, our health insurance, which is high quality and should be high quality for city employees, is expected to rise by 11% this year, double digits. This is not a sustainable thing for any employer, and the city of Burlington is not immune to that. We've also grown significantly the salaries of city employees over recent years with generous negotiations, as they should happen with our unions in a fair way. But it's ended with increases of 20% for our police officers union, 19.5% for our firefighters union, 15% for our AFSCME, which are the other unionized city employees, and 15% for IBW, which doesn't impact the general fund, but it's just to round that out. And then we always extend usually a fifth, the similar increases for non-union. That totals up a significant growth in the investment in city employees. And these are not highly paid jobs when you compare it to the private sector, but there is an obligation to raise the revenue to be able to sustain and pay for those salaries. And then finally, pieces that have also really impacted us significantly in this last year has been the cost of inflation. Has also been the realities on the federal government and its impact on our region and our state. But we've gotten to a place where we had a lot of incredibly difficult pieces to building this budget. But in the end, I just want to emphasize, not only did this budget prioritize affordability for residents, but we were able to work very diligently and hard and present a budget that is a significant decrease in the overall size of the budget from years past. It is no easy task when usually you maybe start at zero, but you always go up percentage-wise, and we certainly have done that in the last 3 fiscal years. And we did that because we asked folks to do the hard work of holding budgets at zero, and that's where was the starting point, and we did that through disciplined budgeting practices, 0% growth compared to what we spent in fiscal year 25. And then we went further and deeper, and we're able to reduce that budget by doing service inventory and other things I'll talk more about upstairs, by more than 1% decrease. That was important because we wanted to make sure at the end of the day that taxes were affordable, and we only had to do a modest increase to residential taxes in the end. Again, I'll talk more upstairs about more details of this, but I just want to wrap up this portion of it to just extend a lot of gratitude to the employees who were part of building this budget. Many in hard leadership roles across departments. I want to thank my CAO. This was an epic year of budgeting. I think, I don't know, we'll have lots of words to describe this budgeting year, I'm sure. But this took a lot of effort across a lot of departments, and it was not without its pain and hardships. This budget was the first time where the city had to get very serious around what we could sustain. It included the layoffs of 25 positions, the reduction in force, I should say. It impacted real people, and it continues to impact city employees as we transition and still do that work of shifting and winding down programs and services. And I realize that is highly impactful on people. The last, actually, very last piece I just want to say here. I think I'm just gonna end it on the thank you. I thought there was one more thing, but that's it, because we'll give a little bit more upstairs. So thank you, and I don't know if CAO, you want to add anything?
Oh, I think that's it for down here.
Down here, okay. All right, and so with that, we will open up for discussion or comments on item 3.1. 1 second, please.
All right, you're on.
There we go. Thank you, team. Love that we know each other's voices so well. Do that. Okay. So back to item 3.1, opening up for discussion by the board.
Going first.
Councilor Barlow.
I'll go first. Just to maybe try to elicit an answer to the question that Councilor posed in the forum. What is the plan? I know this was like sort of weight breaking, and I'm not totally tuned up on all of it, so I was wondering whatever could be shared now. That's about the if it is in fact underfunding the $100,000 to the from short-term rental gross receipts tax to the housing trust fund.
So this came to our attention literally in the last 5 days or so, and so we had to do some deep dive into frankly the archives to even figure out where this was the origin from. And so we were able to figure out and pull up memos from former planning director Megan Tuttle. There was a document there, as well as trying to look back at the ordinance language and compare them around the intentions of that. it is very, very, very late in the budgeting process, and so to move those funds would have a ripple effect in terms of now creating an additional gap in funding for the general fund if we were to move funds any which way. And I'm gonna pass it over, Catherine, to you, just to talk about this a little bit more. We do need to fix this at some point, that this late game, it would require more reductions at this point, and I don't think that is an effective way to manage the budget. So I think what we were talking about so far is to commit to solving this so we can plan for the appropriate use of the housing trust fund to get that clarity, what the intention was. The memo that I mentioned from that former department head indicates something contrary to, I should say contrary, a little bit different than the ordinance language, which is plain, but there's something that wasn't quite lining up, and to do that all on top of everything else we were trying to do back and forth with other parts related to the budget was not something that we could quickly solve. So Catherine, do you want to add more?
Sure. When the short-term rental ordinance was passed, which was almost exactly 3 years ago, June 23rd, 2022. The memo referenced new revenue collected moving to the housing trust fund. And so that's where a little bit of the confusion is. So it seems to have contemplated the keeping of the 2% city gross receipts, which flows into the general fund, and then moving the 7% to the housing trust fund. That does conflict with the ordinance. As we have discussed with the city attorney's office, that we would continue as we have for FY 26. And then for FY 27 to budget the full 9% to go to the housing trust fund. I think the 150,000 is about right, but I was just searching for that number. It is certainly at least that much, if not more, and we don't have an alternate funding source, so we would need to frankly make cuts somewhere else to be able to accommodate that at this point.
Thank you, Councilor Furlow. There are comments or questions?
Off topic a little bit, not related to budget, but I was gonna ask the city attorney soon, next month, if you can give us an update relative to the enforcement on short-term rentals relative to the lawsuit.
Sure, I'll make a note of that.
Happy to do that. Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Other discussion? Councilor Travis.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And again, because I want to have an opportunity to speak to it, the full council, I'm eager to speak to a couple budget related items. So I want to start by reinforcing something that I believe we've heard from there, but we've definitely heard from other city leaders as well, which is that I agree that approving our municipal budget may be the single most important action that the city council takes on a year-to-year basis. It reflects the city's current priorities while also carefully balancing those goals with the affordability interests of Burlington residents. Like you, I generally believe this budget meets those ends, and I thank you, Chief of Staff Jacobson, CIO Schott, we have Brent Kuchenberger here as well, your department heads and all other city staff for the huge lift that it took to get us to today. Of course, the budget can be all things for all people, and even though there are items, a number of us, myself included, asked for that were not incorporated in this budget, I will be supporting this budget here and at our council meeting. I also feel it important, however, to use this space to name a couple areas where I believe this budget and the process leading up to it could have been improved. First, regarding the process, notwithstanding a number of requests from me and other councilors for more information earlier on, including drafts of the city's new service inventory as it was being developed, it was not until we turned the calendar to May that the council started to receive specific critical budget details. I sincerely believe if more eyes were put on this budget at an earlier stage, we could have avoided some of the newly discovered issues we needed to address in recent weeks. And as we turn towards developing the FY 27 budget, which, like it or not, is going to happen sooner than later, I offer up my strong willingness to better partner and collaborate with this administration to secure those details and be a better part in building the budget earlier on in the process. We also haven't really had an opportunity in public session to discuss the extent to which this budget includes a reduction in force. And before voting on it, I need to name how unsettled I still feel around approving the layoffs incorporated in this budget. And I'm sure we all feel unsettled about this. But I want to take an opportunity to reaffirm that the council did not learn any information about these layoffs until 2 months ago, after decisions had been made, just days before folks learned of their terminations. I completely respect personnel decisions are within the purview of the mayor, but I also completely believe the creation or elimination of positions employing those personnel is within the purview of the council. In reviewing the reductions in force, I understand how a number of them are tied to the service inventory. I understand the reasons for the city stepping down some of those services, unfortunately, that impacting the employment of individuals that provide those services. It also appears to me, however, though, that some of the individuals involved in these layoffs are untethered to the service inventory. Those individuals in particular, we've heard quite a bit, and we heard it tonight, about the growth of the city workforce over the last 10 years, about 37 positions funded with unsustainable funding sources. And based on what we had heard, and a number of us anticipated that most of the positions that would be subject to layoff would be included in that group. But now that we've seen the individuals whose positions are being eliminated, many of them are individuals who have been with the city for well more than 10 years. Many of them are individuals who've been with the city for more than 20 years. And I personally think that there should have been ways for us to keep some of these individuals, particularly within CEDO, those individuals that focused on their housing mission, particularly within our Parks Department, those individuals that are focused on our recreation mission. I trust that the staff that remain are going to work their hardest to ensure that CEDO continues to live through its housing mission. I trust the staff that remain are going to work their hardest to ensure that our recreation programs continue as is. But I believe that the best way we could have ensured the continuity of that would have been to secure additional funding to either keep those individuals here or at least keep other people doing those roles. In coming up with this budget, a number of us had asked for additional resources to be put towards staff line items to keep those positions in place. And it's one of those areas that I regret not having incorporated in the budget here. There are a number of areas, though, where we reached agreement, and I'm deeply appreciative to you, Mayor, for you and your team's cooperation. Additional monies for downtown businesses, $130,000 to more downtown events over the course of the year, monies to free parking programs downtown to bring additional visitors here, your team's agreement to explore the development of a direct business relief program for businesses that are directly impacted by long-term construction programs. I'm appreciative of the efforts that we have made on housing and on governmental transparency. I'm grateful to your willingness in response to comments from folks like Councilor Carpenter to move the senior advisor on housing position into CEDO, which I believe will allow for that department's housing mission to continue, as well as language that's in here where our increased impact fees will be able to take a closer look at those and monitor them as they move forward to make sure that we're balancing the asks of the city with the need to support further housing development. Just a couple other services that I'm glad we were able to, with your collaboration, Mayor, to keep in the budget. The holiday tree pickup service that residents have relied on year in and year out. A number of regional programs, which I know will be working with your team to develop a more equitable funding process moving forward. But this year, items like the Art Hop, the Bike Ferry, the Burlington Concert Band, the International Film Festival and City Marathon, the Turning Point Center, and our annual Martin Luther King Day celebration. I'm very glad that we were able to fund those programs still in FY 26, among others. So with that, on the whole, while I still have some reservations around this budget and on the process that led up to it, I do think that the recent days and weeks have been a real model of collaborative and good faith efforts together to land us where we are now. And I do think this is a budget that ultimately generally reflects the priorities of this city and that balances it with affordability concerns. And I look forward to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Travers. Do want to just respond to a couple of things just for the record, just from your comments. Want to be clear that the layoffs that were involved in presenting this budget were, and I said this in both written memos and presentations, was the result of two different tools, Modern Gov Initiative as well as service inventory. So just to clarify, some of the reduction in force were determined as a way for us to offer more effective government through Modern Gov, and we're not part of the service inventory. And if we need to be clear about that, I will hold that. But I just want to make sure that folks know that, and we've made that clear in some of the presentations. The other thing that I think is a reality that folks certainly will understand, I hope, is that whenever we put more money back into the budget, whatever that might be, whatever that issue might be that we're funding or program, whether it's a salary line or a program to reinstate, that puts us further away from closing the actual structural budget gap. We did a lot of hard work to try to move this large shift known as the City of Burlington's budget in a different direction. And every time we go back in a different way, it sends us further off course from actually solving this larger structural issue. That future taxpayers will have to pick up that continued structural challenge, and future councils and mayors will have to continue to solve for that. So I was very mindful, and while we spent a lot of time negotiating in the last week, there were a lot of ideas presented that put money back into the budget that were not related to salaries. Those are still impactful on the bottom line, I just want to say. And I think that's all I'll say on that one. So thank you, Councilor Travers. Are there any other comments or questions on item 3.1? Councilor Newbeezer, did I see your hand up for a minute? Yeah, okay. Councilor Newbeezer?
Yes, and I appreciate in advance you all bearing with me if I drop in and out briefly.
Hold on 1 second, Councilor. You have to just mute something.
Yep.
All right, Councilor Newbeezer, you should be able to go ahead now. Thank you.
Beautiful. Well, I appreciate you all bearing with me in advance. I am going to be traveling for our meeting here and our next meeting later tonight. So you might hear a baby and a 4-year-old in the background at some point. I just wanted to thank you, Mayor, and thank your team, thank my colleagues on the council. I think in the end, I'm going to be happy supporting this budget. It is one that centers affordability, which was when I was going door to door running for city council, the number one thing I heard about, and the number one thing that I committed to as a councilor, trying to prioritize until we can see the results of the tax fairness working group and have mechanisms in place where we can ask folks at the very top to be contributing more. We need to be really, really mindful of any sort of property tax increase, which we've spoken to in this meeting and past meetings. And I think this budget does that. And I will say, as a property taxpayer, I am very glad that this will be a year that I do not see an increase on my overall tax bill when compared to the end fund. But in fact, in combination with the education fund at the state level, we're going to see a decrease most likely as folks in Burlington, which I think is much needed after what we've experienced to date. I did want to ask, I have an amendment and I put it in an email to my council colleague just now on the road here. But if I was planning to make an amendment on the floor of the council meeting, what would seem appropriate to do? There's Winnie. What would seem appropriate to do to additionally make that amendment in this meeting, or to save that for the council meeting? And open to hearing what folks have to say there.
Thank you, Councilor Newbeezer. You could do either. You could do an amendment, but it would have to come through a Board of Finance member. It's what you are. Sorry, I don't know why I didn't say that way. Anyway, you can make that here as a Board of Finance member, or you can do it from the floor upstairs.
Okay, I'm gonna do that from the floor because I have a crying baby here, and I just want to make sure that in my eyes and everything. And I'll have more comments upstairs, but appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further comments or motions? Councilor Barlow.
I would move to recommend that the city council approve the attached resolution.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Is there a second? Thank you, Councilor Travers. Any further discussion on item 3.1 before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to our last item, 3.2, which is sort of the cousin sibling resolution related to our tax assessments or annual tax assessments on the property grand list for the city for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2025 and ending June 30th, 2026. CAO, do you want to say anything to this, just so the members of the public know what this resolution is separate from the big budget resolution?
Yes, since I'm done coughing, thank you. As the mayor said, these are companion resolutions. The Board of Finance has just passed the entire budget for the year, but unless we pass this second resolution, we do not have the property tax rate set. And so it would be difficult for us to fund that budget. So this second one actually sets the municipal property tax rate, which, as the mayor said, is going up very modestly this year, about 2%. And we have just posted the mayor's budget memo, which talks about all of that in detail. And upstairs, I will talk in more detail about each of the splinter taxes and what's going up and down for those of you who care about that. But that's sort of the big picture.
Thank you, CAO. Questions or comments on item, lost myself here, but 4.2, it's great here. Yes, 3.2. 2 is the meetings after and it's done in Sharon. But item 3.2, Councilor Towers.
I'll just note this is in response to some of the comments that were made on the last item as well. I am mindful of the fact that nothing in this resolution or the budget resolution we just passed includes language that in any ways is contrary to questions now that have been raised around the gross receipts ordinance and the amount of the short-term rentals tax, which should be forwarded to the housing trust fund. The entire budget is based off of certain assumptions around our gross receipts that the council still needs to deal with at our meeting in July. It's based off of assumptions around the 2.5% gross receipts tax on restaurants continuing through FY26, although it now sunsets this summer. There is an ordinance amendment pending for the council on July 14th that we'll need to address. And I also would sort of offer up to my colleagues here that that may also be an opportunity for us to bring some clarity to this question that's been raised recently around the short-term rental tax and the housing trust fund. And we'll look to partner with the administration as we look towards that July 14th meeting to try to bring some clarity to that issue. But in terms of what we're voting on tonight, I don't think that there's anything in either this resolution or the other one that we just passed that conflicts with assumptions that have been made in the overall budget on gross receipts collections.
Thank you, Councilor Travers. Any further comments, questions, motions? Councilor Barlow.
I will move to recommend the city council approve the attached resolution.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Travers. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. And with no further business with the Board of Finance, we will adjourn at 6:07 p.m.